being like a god that's come to the people that has...
Well, what sources are you referring to that talk about Apollos?
They talk about Apollo. I'm talking about the Roman literature where it talks about the figure of Apollo and the way he looks and, the imagery that's influenced Christianity.
Which literature?
Just like general Roman literature, like the Pantheon, when you go to the Pantheon and then when they have figures of Apollo.
I've been to the Pantheon, yeah.
So in terms of could Titus and Vespasian having... I'll go off that as a side point because I don't feel like it's going to go anywhere. But I'm talking about if Titus and Vespasian...
I'd be very surprised if they were Jewish because I've not heard any historian ever say that before. I've never come across any texts, and I would need to see evidence of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
But in terms of, do you feel like the Flavian dynasty, so the dynasty of Titus and Vespasian, they had a influence on early Christianity?
In what way? What influence do you think they might have on Christianity?
One example I can give is the most prominent symbol of early Christianity was the anchor and the dolphin, and the anchor and the fish. And that also happened to be the symbol the House of Flavian used as their house symbol.
I thought the earliest symbol was the fish.
Yeah, but also in association with the anchor, because
I've not come across the anchor so much. What is fish?
One of the earliest iconography.
Well, what does fish mean?
The fish. So the fish is a different symbol to the anchor and the fish.
Okay, so
together.
Right. The usual common one was, you know what fish means?
Yeah. Ichthus.
Which means?
Yeah. So sorry.
No, what does it mean? It just matters. Yeah. Why did Christianity have fish as a symbol? They put on the walls of the catacombs, for example.
Of men, like the illusion.
No. I was asking because it ties in with your other point. Ichthus. Each letter begins as the beginning of a Greek word, which in English translates as Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior.
Yep.
Right. So it's an anagram or whatever like that, and the word ichthus just happens to correspond to that sentence. Anchor doesn't correspond to anything I've ever heard of, so I'm beginning to know why anchor was chosen.
Are you familiar with the catacombs of Saint Domitilla?
No.
So this is one of the earliest.
Well, what does the anchor mean?
So the anchor, according to traditional Christianity, it means hope of Jesus.
I've not really come across that. No.
But the other meaning of the anchor in the same period and the same context, in the same time frame, was as a house symbol for the Emperor Vespasian and Titus.
Yeah.
And
they weren't Christians or Jews. They were pagans. They had nothing to do with Christianity theologically.
The reason they adopted the anchor and the fish was because it was used in the Seleucid dynasty.
No.
Okay. Yeah. So it was used in the Seleucid dynasty by Seleucus back in those times, and the reason he used it was to try and justify himself as some sort of sun god.
Okay. Well, that was very common to be. Yeah, most of the emperors were sons of God or proclaimed as divine at their death, or by the Senate who voted them. But that had nothing to do with Christianity.
No, but then I'm saying that was used in that context in Greek.
Oh dear. Anyway,
so that was used in that context in Greece.
But what context? Sorry.
In the context of it being Seleucus, the Seleucid emperor, he used the anchor and the fish as a way of showing that he is a son of God in some way, shape, or form. And then that symbol was readopted by the Roman emperors Vespasian and Titus to become their house symbol.
Yeah, but because it was Christian, you think?
No. It wasn't a Christian symbol when Vespasian and Titus adopted it. Okay. But what's really interesting is the early church used the same symbol for their catacombs.
What symbol?
The anchor and the fish, and the anchor and the dolphin.
But they used fish, not because it had anything to do with Vespasian.
This is a different symbol.
Okay.
This is a different symbol. So it's the anchor and the dolphin, or the anchor and the fish. So not just the ichthus.
But the ichthus was far more common because it was explicitly Christological, whereas the anchor... what's the Christological significance of the anchor, do you think?
So the anchor is meant to be about the fishers of men, so referring to that passage in the New Testament.
Okay.
So, but it was also used by
I don't see anything... Yeah, if it was a coincidence, because the pagan emperors are not Christians or Jews or anything like that.
Yeah.
They didn't care about Christianity. If they did, they persecuted them. There's no relationship.
Yeah, but they weren't persecuted. What I'm trying to argue is... early Christianity is intrinsically linked to the Flavian dynasty of Roman emperors.
Is it?
Because
how is it intrinsically linked?
The first church father is Saint Clement of Rome, who was a Flavian. the earliest evidence we
Sorry,
have of
which is the church father? How do you know that he's the very first Clement of Rome?
Clement of Rome, he's seen as one of the early church fathers.
Oh, one of the earliest.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, one of the. I thought he's the very, very first.
I misspoke.
That's interesting. I didn't realise there was that ranking. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, he was one of the first. Yeah, but what's he got to do with Roman emperors?
So he was allied with Vespasian and Titus.
Really? How do you know that?
Because his wife.
Whose wife? Whose wife? The emperor's wife or
Clement of Rome's wife?
What was her? Right.
She-
Where did you read about her?
So the earliest, one of the earliest archaeological evidences we have of Christianity is her catacombs.
Right.
And they bear the symbol of the anchor and the dolphin.
Yeah, but you were going to say about how her husband was Clement of Rome.
Yeah.
So what was, and she was connected to the emperors.
Yeah, because why would she be using the same symbol?
Well, which symbol is that?
Sorry?
Which symbol is that?
The anchor and the dolphin and the anchor and the fish. Why would they be using the same symbol as the Roman emperors of that time?
I don't know, but there's no connection between, I'm aware, between Clement and the emperors at all. I mean, I've read his letters.
Yeah.
They're very well known. They're published still.
Yeah.
And he makes no particular reference to the emperors at all. It's not what they're about. They're a persecuted minority in Rome. They're just basically, for the Romans, they're just low life, because a lot of the Christians were slaves and poor people and so on. There were some
really early.
This is the end of the first century, yeah, and they're not really people of great standing. There are one or two exceptions, but they're mostly from the lower social classes, so they don't really have that kind of elite standing that they would be connected to the emperor. And I'm not aware of anything by any emperor apart from Constantine, which in the 4th century, where Christianity has any role at all within the imperial household.
So, what I'm saying is the emperors Titus and Vespasian, sorry to give you but the emperors Titus and Vespasian, they needed to justify their lineage of emperors because they're not from the Julius lineage of
Justify what?
Justify becoming emperor. Because back then church and state were the same thing, so you had to justify.
So back then what, sorry?
Back
church
then,
and state?
Church and state, as in religion and state were the same thing. So to become an emperor, you had to justify it through
but there was no church and state. Yeah, okay.
Paraphrasing, so.
But there was no church and state then. That happened.
Talking about the imperial court, and to become an emperor, you had to justify it through the imperial court.
Yeah. So what do you think then? I don't really go along with anything you said actually, but what's the end product of it? Are you saying that the Roman Empire from the beginning was creating Christianity or influencing it, or what are you trying to say?
I don't have all the sources to hand, but what I'm trying to say is that there was a Jewish revolt against Rome. The context of
you mean AD 70? Not the AD 31.
The context of first century Palestine was very hostile towards the Roman Empire, right? There was
hang on, sorry, you're making a lot of statements. I'm just trying to process them.
Sure.
The first century Palestine was very hostile to Rome.
Yeah, to the Roman occupation. So we had we had a community of proto-zealots.
Well, some were, some weren't. According to Josephus, hang on. I don't agree with your sweeping statement.
Sure.
The Sadducees were not like that. They were in bed with the Romans, not literally, but they were very pro-Roman. The Pharisees were pretty not political. That they were focused much on Torah observance and so on. The Zealots certainly were, but they ended up killing a lot of Jews as well. The Essenes were even more unpolitical because they withdrew into the desert. So I wouldn't agree with your characterization that the Jews in Palestine were all rising up against the Romans. I think the Jewish community was quite split into different things.
What I'm trying to say is that, so in the Jewish community, there was the Pharisees, the Zealots, and the Sicarii, which were very anti-Rome. Then you had a group of Jews, like the Sadducees, the Herodians, that were allied with Rome, right? In some way, shape, or form. So there's this division in first century Palestine.
That's what I was trying to say. Rather than your claim, which was that Rome was the Palestine was Judeans were anti-Roman. I don't
these
quite.
These are like puppet leaders. The Sadducees and the Herodians are puppet leaders installed by the Roman Empire.
But it's a bit like today, in terms of Muslims, some support the rulers, some are against them, some are apolitical, don't want to be involved in politics.
Yeah.
Some support violent attacks on the West. There's quite a similar kind of dynamic going on.
That's what I'm trying to point to. So what I'm trying to point to is the potentiality of Isa alayhi salam coming and having much support amongst the Pharisees and the Zealots against the Roman-aligned Herodians and the Roman-aligned...
Oh, so Jesus the revolutionary, he's into revolt. It's possible, but...
And then what I'm trying to say is this mentality...
It's not really Islamic,
but this mentality existing in first century Palestine, the Roman Empire going in, destroying Jerusalem, right? Because there's a lot of potentially early Christians that were very anti-Rome and Torah Orthodox, and Jews that were anti-Rome and Torah Orthodox. So the Roman Empire, as a form of propaganda, because you can destroy Jerusalem physically, but you can't destroy Jerusalem mentally, right? So as a form of propaganda, them issuing Torah light, like Roman-friendly Gospels, as a form of Roman propaganda.
So who's issuing Torah-friendly Gospels?
No, I'm saying promotion of.
Oh, who's promoting Torah-friendly Gospels?
So the people that will be promoting Torah-friendly Gospels are Herodian Jews.
Herodian Jews.
So, for example.
So the Herodian Jews are promoting the four Gospels.
No, I'm saying, for example, through Paul. So through the figure of Paul, right? Paul, the reason he was sent by the Herodians to quench the early Christians was because he found them a threat, right?
Right.
He found them a threat, right? Paul, he was killing and persecuting the early Christians because he found them a threat.
In what way did he find them a threat?
What I'm proclaiming is he possibly found
I'm generally interested why he persecuted the early Christians.
Yeah, so the theory is, the classical tradition we're told by Christians is he had a sudden change of heart. What if he didn't have a change of heart? What if his goal was the same the whole way through? So maybe he was persecuting the early church because they were Torah Orthodox, they would practice the law, right? And he's a Herodian Jew who's allied with Rome.
What do you mean a Herodian Jew? Because as far as I know, Paul wasn't a Herodian Jew. He was Paul of Tarsus. He was a Hellenistic, Greek-speaking Jew from what is today Turkey.
Sure.
Had no particular relationship with Herod that I'm aware of. I mean, he wasn't known as a Herodian Jew, as far as I'm aware at all. If anything, Gamaliel in Jerusalem, the famous Jewish scholar, I wasn't aware that he was associated with Herod specifically. Where did you get that idea from?
So that's kind of from, in some other writings by Josephus, he talks about a member of the Herodian family called Saulus. And this Saulus is probably a son of Alexandra.
So Josephus mentions Paul?
This is potentially a link to Paul.
No, but does Josephus mention Paul?
So he talks about
because I'm not aware that he does.
He talks about a figure called Saulus, and
but does it? Yeah, Saulus is a very common name because it's the first king of Israel. A lot of people were called Saul. No, does he mention the Paul that we're talking about, Josephus?
So that's the theory. That's the theory.
No, not a theory. Yeah. Sorry, it's a question of fact here.
Yeah.
Does Josephus mention Paul of Tarsus? And my answer is no. So what you're saying, you're constructing a speculative idea based on not actual evidence, but on what might have been the case. Josephus doesn't mention Apostle Paul, doesn't know about him, doesn't care about him. He mentions Jesus, but very briefly, in a heavily interpreted text that we have today. So it's unlikely, because Paul wasn't a serious player in the first century world, according to the Romans. So he's just some dude who got executed in Rome, probably.
Yeah, but one of the ties to Paul being Saulus is Saulus as a figure gets called to the Emperor Nero.
We need to look at the passage.
Sure.
Seriously, we can't. We're not going to do it now. No. We need to look at this properly. I've never heard any scholar ever suggest that Josephus is referenced as the Apostle Paul.
Okay, I can explore this with you.
And if he never mentions him by name, then this is speculation. Okay.
But in terms of so the early church being Torah Orthodox.
I wonder what you were doing. Okay.
So what I'm trying to say,
you're very kind. He's keeping me dry from.
Even in the.
Otherwise, I'd be wet by now.
Sorry, I should have brought the umbrella.
No, he's very kindly protecting me.
So, in terms of Paul as a figure, you mentioned he was Greek speaking. He seemed to be. He had.
Well, it's in Tarsus. It was a Greek Hellenistic city. Yeah.
For sure. So what I'm talking about is he could possibly be one of those Jews in that context that was more aligned with Rome than with the Pharisees and that kind of mentality.
He was a Roman citizen.
Yeah.
So he was aligned with Rome. Absolutely.
Sure.
He was born a Roman citizen. Yeah.
What I'm talking about is he was sent to persecute the early church, right?
Yeah.
So he was persecuting the early church.
Yes, I know.
Potentially because the early church were Torah Orthodox, more of the mentality of the Pharisees and the Zealots than he would like.
It's possible. What's your evidence for that? Historical
evidence.
evidence.
So in terms of like the conflict between Paul and James.
What's the evidence of Paul persecuting the church because they were Torah observant Jews?
No, but there's evidence of Paul persecuting the church, right? And then there's evidence
yes, but there is a reason why. No one disputes he persecuted. He says that himself in his letters, so that's not an issue. But the reason why you're saying that he persecuted Christians because they were more Torah observant.
No, I'm saying
Jews?
this is potentially one of the reasons, right?
Well, what was the reasons again? That they
were more Torah Orthodox than he liked.
I think, okay, and your evidence for that is?
The fact that he argues with James at a later stage of the temple about circumcision.
So what argument, where is this?
So in terms of, when they conflict on opinions, on...
Which text are we talking about?
We're talking about in the Gospels, where Paul gets brought to the temple in order to repent and perform a sacrifice.
Paul's not mentioned in the Gospels.
No, in the Gospel, sorry, in the writings in the New Testament, not in the Gospel, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so he gets mentioned in the writings in the New Testament where he's brought to...
You mean in Acts?
In Acts, yeah. So in Acts, where he's brought to the temple and he performs a sacrifice to show he's not against...
Acts 15.
Mosaic law, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is the Torah, that Paul was against the early Christians because they were Torah Orthodox, and then he suddenly has a change of heart. He sees the revelation.
But why would Paul, an Orthodox Jew, have a problem with other Orthodox Jews who are practicing the law? I don't get it.
What if he wasn't? Like, what I'm trying to say is, what if he wasn't as Orthodox?
But he said he was. He said he talks about his life prior to this vision he had when he was very practicing. He boasts about it. He said, I was faultless. He says in 1 Corinthians, as regards the law, the Torah, I was faultless.
Yeah.
That's the English translation, usually, in his observance. So he was a guy who took the Torah, as Jews did. I mean, that's what they...
But what I'm trying to say is we're not... I feel like we're ignoring the dynamic of there was two types of mentality existing, two big divisions of mentality existing in first century Palestine. There was Jews there that were very Roman aligned, and Jews that weren't as practicing.
But I just think I don't think Paul persecuted Christians because they obeyed the Torah too much. I've not heard that view, but I think he did persecute them because they claimed that Messiah had come in Jesus, and that this Messiah was crucified and rose again, and that this is a preposterous belief if you're an Orthodox Jew, because nowhere in the Jewish scriptures does it ever speak about the Messiah being crucified, an ignominious death, a very shameful death. I mean, it's a disgusting idea from that kind of perspective. The prophets never foresaw this happening. So I suspect he could have been persecuting a sect that was just a crazy, mad movement that was just appeared on the scene, that were coming with these silly ideas of the Messiah being horribly crucified. I mean, you can imagine the mindset being disgusted by that. That's more plausible rather than, oh, you Christians are obeying the law even more than I am, therefore I'm going to persecute them. That doesn't sound plausible. Because he would praise them. He would say, well, wow, you're putting me to shame, you Christians. You're obeying it even more than I am. So I don't quite buy that. Unless you've got scriptural evidence. I mean, not scriptural evidence. If you've got actual text to have Paul say, I persecute the Christians because they obeyed the Torah more than I did or something. So.
But in terms of like after he has his conversion to Christianity, he starts to preach a very Roman-aligned religion. Right? So
Roman-aligned religion.
In terms of it being very Torah-light, not being Torah Orthodox.
Well, it's very, Romans chapter 13. He talks about obeying the authorities. So it's very Philo-Roman. Yeah,
so I'm saying,
that's true.
What if he was like that the whole way through? And then he never had a change of heart. He just...
A change of heart about what?
So if he was allied with Rome before, if he
Well, he was a Roman citizen. So
Sure. So he was a Roman citizen.
He
right?
wasn't some
So
kind of
why would
independent dude.
Why would the Romans give him citizenship if he was
I'm not sure they did give him
mentality?
citizenship. I think he was born a Roman citizen.
Yeah.
His family were Romans.
Yeah, sure.
But you see, but most Jews lived outside of Jerusalem, outside of Israel, in the diaspora. Like most Jews today, don't live in Israel. They live in America or wherever. They don't live there, and so he was born, like most Jews are, even today, maybe in the West, with Western passports, Western languages. They even look Western, actually. They even look like white people mostly. So Paul would not have been born in Judea.
What I'm saying
So it's not like a change of allegiance. He wasn't
born in Judea, right?
No.
You're saying he was basically very Torah Orthodox.
Well, no, I'm not. I'm saying he says he was.
Yeah, I'm saying why should we take him at his word?
Well, why not? He was a Jew. Jews obeyed the Torah. I mean, it's the default position for Jews to obey the Torah. That's what Jews do.
Yeah.
So it's you had to argue that he didn't really, because that would be very odd for a Jew not to follow the law.
But would it?
It's like for Muslim. I mean, I know they're non-practicing Muslims, but it's even more so in the ancient world that if you were identified as a Jew, part of a Jewish community, you obeyed the law. It's part of your community. It's what you did. So, hello.
Hello.
So, unless you can come up, I mean, he says in 1 Corinthians that he obeyed the law faultlessly. I have no reason. I don't know why I would doubt that. Well, why would a Jew make up a story about them being Jewish? I mean, that's what Jews did. They obeyed the law.
Yeah, but I'm saying Herodian Jews.
Herodian Jews? What are they?
Jews in terms of like King Herod and.
The Herod's just a guy. I wasn't aware there's a sect called the Herodian Jews.
Jews who are basically the puppet government of Palestine at the time, and they were very Roman aligned, right?
Well, Herod was a puppet of the Romans.
Yeah, so I'm saying Jews of that variety. So
yeah, but I'm not sure.
I'm
not sure. I mean, I don't know of the evidence that Paul was a part of this. What you're calling Herodian Jews. I just don't see it. I mean, maybe there's evidence. I don't. You have to tell me what it is.
Sure.
But you mentioned Josephus, but then Josephus doesn't actually mention Paul, so that's not really evidence. It's your speculation that he might have alluded to him by someone who had a similar name. But Saul was a very common name, as I've said before. It's like being called Muhammad or something. It's not. He's the first king of Israel, so he's a very prestigious figure.
But in terms of how many Sauls were called up to the emperor in the years around 70 AD, and both Paul and both Saulus were called up to the emperor around that time. So there's one evidence of it, one proposition I'm giving of them being the same person. I can look up for some more if you want.
No, not really. I think your theories are speculative, actually, and I don't find them very compelling without any evidence. But you could be right. I mean, hey, we don't have the whole story, and there's lots of gaps in our narrative. So you could be right. I just don't feel you presented any evidence to suggest that that's...
Sorry, I didn't mean to I was just playing it off with yourself. So, Karen?
No, I'm just giving my honest feedback. You could be right, but I don't feel you presented enough evidence, particularly from the sources.
Yeah.
But you might be right, because we have lots of gaps, so who knows? God knows best. And welcome salam. Getting wet.
I have a question.
Sorry?
I have a question. All right,
just having a quick. Sorry, I'm just finishing off a conversation with him. Sorry.
I think there's some sort of evidence, but you can't say for certainty.
No, I'm not saying for certainty, but I'm saying for me, this is far more compelling than the Christian line of events. For me, this seems far more compelling.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, as I say, it is possible, but
it does undermine biblical scholarship.
And that's why I feel a lot of New Testament scholarship, they don't support this opinion. They're very anti this opinion because it would undermine the entire New Testament. You need this.
No, I can imagine. I can imagine a lot of scholars would say to what you said, "That's very well and good. What is your evidence?" Because the historical critical method is all about looking at the text in their context, authenticating them, not being anachronistic, etc., etc. There's a very established methodology that historians use, and I imagine they'll put what you said through that grid and look at the other side and what's come out and say, actually, there's not much there, but you could be right because, hey, we don't know everything. And that's what I'm trying to do there, is to test what you're saying against the sources. And I'm not really I'm not feeling you're presenting a strong case. It's speculative, and Saul may be the Apostle Paul, therefore.
Yeah, but even if he's not,
Even though no historian I've ever known has ever identified Paul in Josephus's works. And I'm thinking, wow, that would be a first. And if historians are not identifying Saul in Josephus, you have to ask why, because he's not there. And the word Saul doesn't count. It's a very common name.
Okay.
It's like the word Mary, for example, and James. There are like 6 Marys, 4 Jameses in the New Testament itself. And even Jesus, Joshua in Hebrew, is a very, very common name. We just think it applies to one dude. But there are lots of Jesuses even in the first century.
This Saulus that I'm proposing that as being the figure Paul, he was probably the son of Alexandra. He was a member of the royal family. He was born to a wealthy.
Oh, that's definitely not Saulus Tarsus then, because Paul wasn't born into any. No one's ever. He's never said that he was born into the royal family. This is. He's not known to history as being that at all. Yeah. This is someone else.
Okay.
I mean, you can't just say he's Saul and therefore that's Paul.
How common was Roman citizenship amongst? How common was Roman citizenship amongst like the Jewish diaspora?
I don't know.
Because I don't feel like it was so easy to attain.
When you say you don't feel, that's based on what historical evidence?
Yeah, sure. That's just a feeling. That's why I said feeling.
Because a feeling isn't evidence. Yeah.
Sure. Because I've just heard things. I don't want to like use them as factual, but I've heard it was quite hard to attain Roman citizenship as a diaspora.
But notice you said attain. Yeah. What if you're born as a Roman citizen?
Yeah,
but Paul didn't attain citizenship. He was born a Jew, born a Roman citizen. Attaining it is one thing, and being born is another thing. It's like becoming an American citizen. You just can't go into a shop and buy it. Hang on. It's something a green card is you need to. But for Americans, kids are born into American families all the time. It's not a big deal for them. It's easy for them to. It's easy for an American couple to have a kid, and that kid's gonna be an American. But if I want to be an American citizen, boy, do I have to do this and this and this. Yeah. So it's easy or not, depending on who you are. But also depended on the emperor. Some emperors opened up citizenship more to the frontier tribes to try and incorporate, like Hadrian did. He wanted people to come in, become Roman citizens, and stop fighting the Romans. But others wanted to push them back and didn't want them to become Roman. I mean, it depends on which Roman emperor as well. It's not like a trans-historical, they never accepted anyone. It depends which time.
This is like, the whole issue of Paul is a bit of a side note to the bigger issue of, the Flavian dynasty being linked to Christianity. So in terms of that,
no, I don't think there's any link. I've not heard you present any evidence at all. There's any. But by link, what do you mean by link? But in terms of any positive involvement in Christianity, I don't think there's anything at all. I don't think you've given any evidence at all.
But do you feel like? Okay, I'll stop using the word "feel" because I feel like I'm using that too much. But in terms of the Gospels,
Nazam. It should be the other way up, Nazam.
Do you want to use it? I don't think it's raining so much.
It's not raining anyway, Nazam.
It's not raining.
It's not raining.
Okay, so with the New Testament, if it can be established that the New Testament is a form of Roman propaganda against the Torah Orthodox Pharisees and the Torah Orthodox Zealots, and is written in support of the Herodian Jews and the Sadducees in order to promote that kind of thinking.
No, I don't think that's true at all. I think that's for a start, the New Testament's a library of books.
Yeah.
It's not like written by one guy.
Yeah.
So you're generalizing about a lot of people.
Sure.
When I read Matthew, for example, which is very pro-Torah, Jesus, a Torah observant Jew, encourages Torah observance. This Herodian trope that you're mentioning is not there at all, and that's the most pro-Torah gospel of the four, I would argue.
But okay, let's use the example of Luke. So you mentioned earlier that Luke, when it references the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, that's alluding to the fact that it was written after the destruction of the temple, right? And it's alluding to the armies.
I didn't say that. I said Luke, writing after Mark, talks about the armies invading Jerusalem. It's a historical detail that's missing from Mark, suggesting that Luke was writing after the events. So he's adding colour to his story of the destruction of the temple that only someone who knew about the events could have done. Mark, I'm saying, didn't know that, had that knowledge. Therefore, I think it's a genuine prophecy there. I have no problem with Jesus prophesying in the temple. Absolutely, he's a prophet. Absolutely, but the detail, the specificity that Luke adds, betrays the fact that he wrote after AD 70. There are other details as well, but that's one of the one of the big reasons why scholars date Luke after Mark in the 80s. But it's nothing to do with Herod or Herodian temple stuff. I don't. You seem to have an idée fixe with Herod. I'm not sure.
No, I'm talking.
Where that's come
what
from.
I'm talking about, what I'm trying to make a clear distinction is between the practicing Jewish laymen and the practicing Pharisees and the practicing Zealots, and the puppet government of Palestine, which was like people like King Herod, people like the Sadducees, who were Roman aligned, right? And this is the context of first century Palestine.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is the Gospels seem to be promoting. The Gospels seem to be very strong propaganda against the Pharisees, very strong propaganda against the Zealots. That's what I'm trying to portray. And what I'm trying to portray is...
Well, they're anti-Pharisee, yeah, this is true.
Yeah.
But why are they anti-Pharisee?
Why are they? Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's your theory?
My theory is they're anti-Pharisee because potentially Isa alayhi salam could have been a prominent figure amongst the Pharisees, right? And the reason that they're anti-Pharisee is to quench that thinking, completely destroy that thinking.
Well, what you speak about Pharisee thinking as if there was a thing called Pharisee thinking. What is Pharisee thinking?
Being very anti-Rome.
Because Pharisee theology is something that I think Jesus would have agreed with over against the Sadducees, for example.
That's what I'm saying.
So he's not anti-Pharisee historically at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, that's the irony.
The reason the Gospels are written is a form of propaganda against the Pharisees, against that thinking, in order to portray Isa alayhi salam as a Roman-aligned figure. But why would he have been Roman-aligned? He would have been more Pharisee-aligned.
No, I think, Luke, for example, is very pro-Roman. Whenever the Roman centurions and whatnot appear in the Gospels, they're always kind of benign figures. They're not kind of a terrible threat. And you're right, they are quite pro-Roman. But they're trying to present Christianity as not a threat to the authorities. So don't persecute us. We're hard on our Jewish brothers, and we're quite friendly towards you lot, the Romans. Yeah, that's there throughout the New Testament. Paul as well. It's there in Romans 13. There is one exception, which is why I don't agree with your characterization of the Book of Revelation, which is very, very anti-Roman. The whore of Babylon, as it's called, is Rome. It's a way. So, the Book of Revelation is very anti-Roman, whereas Paul is quite pro-Roman.
Revelation is written very distinct from the other books in terms of the time period. As it lasts.
What do you mean very distinct?
Is it written in a later period, right? Revelation.
I'm not sure when it was written, but the point is it's in the New Testament. This is your point. It was written in the 1st century, probably. I think it's not the last book to be written. That is usually seen as 2 Peter, authored maybe in the middle of the 2nd century. So it's not the last book of the Bible to be written, and it's in the New Testament, and it's the opposite of what you say.
Yeah.
But so I see you're overgeneralizing. I think I'm
talking more about the Gospels. I'm talking about the Gospels being propaganda against the Pharisees.
I think, but you can argue that if you want. I think it's a bit strong, but you can argue that. Yeah, because they're friendly towards Rome. You're right. Yeah, I don't think it's Roman state propaganda. I think the Gospels are not written by Romans who, on behalf of the Roman state, trying to. I don't think that's.
I'm not saying even if they're not written top down approach. I'm talking about that thinking is promoted. So Gospels that were more Roman aligned are promoted instead of Gospels that were more Gnostic.
I think that the Gospels that are not offensive to the Romans. That's really important. To help Christianity be accepted by the mainstream Roman society, and it worked, by the way, because Constantine ended up agreeing and becoming the emperor. So it was a successful campaign. But I do stress in the earlier Gospels, and this is why I think I don't quite agree with you. The emphasis in the early Gospels is on a pretty imminent eschatology. The world, the empire, and the world is not expected to be around for hundreds of years anyway. It's not like we've got to keep on the Romans because, hey, they're the new order, and we've got to keep it on the good side of the Roman emperor. No. The way Jesus portrayed in the Synoptics is that the world order, as we know, is going to be completely overturned, and pretty soon. And in fact, according to Mark 13, it's going to happen within the generation then living. Mark 13:30 says all these things will happen within this generation, which includes the destruction of the temple and the return of the Son of Man, gathering the elect from the four corners. This is not business. This is not business as usual. This is not the Roman order just continuing forever like it did. So later on with Paul, I agree with you, and with Luke, but particularly in Mark and Matthew, you get this strong sense of imminent eschatology. So I don't think they were pro-Roman in the sense of having a high regard. They saw that as temporary, and it was soon to be overturned by God.
In terms of, I'm not sure if you're looking at the but with Vespasian and Titus, and them trying to associate themselves as being a messianic figure.
I don't think they did. You said we're going around in circles now. I don't think there's any evidence of that.
The most prominent Jewish rabbi of the time mentioned the Emperor Vespasian or the Emperor Titus as being a Messiah.
Which Jewish rabbi? Because this is news. You've not said this to me before, have you? No.
I'm not sure if the internet's going to work so well.
Anyway, I need to move around because I'm completely cold and my legs are frozen.
Yeah. My fingers are frozen.
Any more? There's another one. They're like insects.
Yeah, it's like insects, isn't it? It's like parasite.
Yeah. Parasites is a rude way of putting it. Yeah, parasites. Yeah. Okay. Just got to find the Jews.
This is the issue, isn't it?
Yeah. I've got to get rid of these microphones.
I'm just
I don't know, just put it in the bag or something. Actually, no,
Anyway, you're saying you've got some Jewish rabbi. What's the name of the Jewish rabbi? The most famous one I thought was Hillel. Or maybe Gamaliel. Those two are the most famous ancient Jewish rabbis in Jerusalem. One of them allegedly taught Paul. So what was
with what they mentioned about?
what's the name of this rabbi?
I'm trying to find it. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm not familiar with what this rabbi said about Vespasian.
So Josephus, right? He mentioned I'm not talking about him as being the rabbi, but he also prophesied that Vespasian will become an emperor, right?
Yeah, of course. Sure. That's well known. That's not disputed. But not a Jewish emperor. I really would be shocked to hear that he thought he was a Jewish emperor, because he wasn't Jewish. He wasn't Jewish anyway. It's unthinkable that a non-Jew would be a Jewish Messiah. And I know about. Anyway, let's not go.
Okay. So it's
Yes.
Sorry. So he mentions here that he
Mentions where?
So I'm just trying to.
I just need to know the sources.
Sure.
Sorry, thank you. I just got to move around because I'm freezing to death. Isn't it?